who wrote the Bible? Now you might say, well, God wrote the Bible. But that leaves open the question, what does that mean that God wrote the Bible? And to what degree does God work through people? Modern scholars bring tools to this question that to some degree are an accumulation of learning in recent decades, namely the tools of archaeology, foreign language, the reading of a text with a mindset of seeking to understand, like a puzzle, how was it put together? Knowledge of other cultures around the Middle East and how those cultures might have been similar or different to what's written in the Bible. This book, Who Wrote the Bible, I read about 25 years ago and found remarkably engaging, like reading a mystery novel, understanding how a modern Bible scholar sees a variety of oral traditions that got woven together into the extraordinary tapestry that is our Bible. Although Richard Elliot Friedman, when he wrote this book, taught at UCSD, I never met him until just over New Year's at a conference on a festival of conversation, where he spoke about his most recent book, The Exodus, how it happened and why it matters. Now, people will say, how long did it take you, Rabbi, to prepare your sermon? My teacher of homiletics said, just tell him your age, because every sermon is a product of lifetime. But I can tell you that it at least took as long to read this entire book that I will now share in 10 minutes or less. The starting point for how it happened relates to our Torah reading. It says that 600,000 men went out from Egypt. Total population, somewhere between 2 and 3 million people. Well, miracles can happen, but you would have to view it as an extraordinary miracle for a variety of reasons. If it's 2 million people walking 8 across toward Mount Sinai, which is 7 weeks later, only half of them would have left in terms of those 7 weeks. Archaeologists say if there were 40 years with 2+ million people in the Sinai, one, you would expect it to be a very green place. But 2, there is no archaeological evidence that has yet been found for that kind of mass migration over that time. Now, some archaeologists do point out that a jeep in Mount Sinai that was left behind in 1973 was found beneath 15 feet of sand within 40 years, which is to say a lot can get buried. Yet at the same time, archaeologists would emphasize that it's not very conceivable that there would be 2 to 3 million people for 40 years in the desert and there would be no scintilla of evidence. And so the question is, who went out from Egypt, if anybody? Some Bible scholars would claim no one went out. It was all a later description. But Richard Elliot Friedman, in this book and in the aftermath of conferences on this topic, asserts with great confidence that there indeed was an exodus from Egypt. He would say that when it says 600,000, that is a later number. There were that many people at the time of King Solomon living in Israel. Some scholars would say when it says Sheshmot Elif, that 1,000 is not 1,000 but clan, 600 clans that went out. But Richard Elliot Friedman will emphasize that throughout the Bible, when the word Aleph is used, it's used as a number, often with 100, mea. He would say that there are many authors to the Bible, and most of the Bible are written by Levites. In those texts that he and Bible scholars identify today with the Levites, there are Egyptian names, some of them we know well. Moshe is a Hebrew name. Pinchas is a Hebrew name. Hur is a Hebrew name, and many others. Those names, those Hebrew names, at least 10, they only occur in those texts that are identified with having been written by the Levites. Levite, the word itself, lilavot, to accompany, means they were attached. They were attached to the people living in the land. What he would also add, that because the Levites were slaves in the land of Egypt, many of the descriptions of the two angels atop the tabernacle are similar to certain kinds of iconography in Egypt. The tabernacle itself is similar to that which was in Egypt. Though the name Yah, like in Yud-He, Vav-He, comes, archaeologists say, from Midian, the area in the south of the Sinai. And what the Levites did is they brought together the name El, which was the name for God in the land of the Near East, with Yah, Yud-He, Vav-He, and said they are one and the same. Listen, Israel. Yud-He, Vav-He, and El, Eloheinu, they're one and the same. But what was dramatic about this hypothesis of Richard Elliot Friedman is the statement that everywhere in the ancient Near East, and that's again the tools that modern scholars have of both the languages and the literature, there is no other religious tradition in which the foreigner was commanded to be protected, which occurs 52 times in the Bible. As I showed you, the first time that the word Torah is used from our parsha today is the Torah is that the stranger is to be protected equally, one law for all. This word ger will later be understood by the rabbis as convert. But Rashi in the 11th century will interpret that verse as saying converts need to be treated equally. But the Bible scholar Richard Elliot Friedman will emphasize that ger is used repeatedly in the Bible and linked to your status, Israelites, in the land of Egypt, when you were strangers in a strange land. For those who came and helped with the people in the land of Israel to become united in a religious tradition that we are privileged to bear, emphasized for the first time that all people are created in the image of God. Why, he emphasizes, was there a need for the creation story to be attached to this historical telling of a people's history? Because the image of God was revolutionary. The image of God was the creator of the whole world who cared about morality and who said that all people were created in the image of God. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, and God spoke to Moses saying, is the most repeated line in the entire 5 books of Moses. My teacher, formerly a professor at the University of California at Berkeley, Rabbi Jacob Milgram, emphasized as a modern Bible scholar that when it says, and God spoke to Moses saying, it was the best understanding of our people to hear and understand God's will for us. Ribbono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, it is jarring to see the world through historical lenses. For it is easier to sometimes believe in miracles, but yet adulthood for many of us means to look at the world with open eyes. And to do so is to see other religions and to know that other religions' texts have a history, and thereby to come back to our sacred text, to know that it is sacred, for it is our people's attempt to see the world through the eyes of a creator, of the whole of humanity and the whole of creation, and yet it is to acknowledge that that text too may have a history. May we indeed treat the stranger in our midst with one law. May we be open of heart to see all people as the children of God, for that is the teaching that came through our ancestors, and today with Ava that we celebrate as a challenge